History is filled with the stories of great kings, vast empires, and epic battles. But every now and then, someone comes along who is so vibrant, so defiant, that they change the story itself. This is about one of those people. A woman who became one of the wealthiest and most powerful figures in all of Europe during the High Middle Ages. She was a duchess in her own right, a patron of culture who helped shape our modern idea of romance, and a political force that refused to be silenced. And she held a title no woman before or since has ever claimed: Queen of France, and then Queen of England. She was the only woman in history to wear the crown of both France and England. She took the cross and joined a crusade, divorced a king, and then immediately married his greatest rival. But her most audacious act? Fueling a rebellion against her own husband, a rebellion led by their sons. So, how did one woman build so much power in a world completely dominated by men? And why was she willing to risk it all to defy two of Europe's most powerful kings? To understand Eleanor, you can't start in Paris or London. You have to start in the sun-drenched, vibrant south, in the massive Duchy of Aquitaine. In the 12th century, Aquitaine wasn't just a chunk of land. It was a sprawling, wealthy domain covering nearly a third of modern-day France. It was bigger and richer than the lands the French king himself controlled. This was a land of vineyards and bustling ports, a cultural crossroads where the stern piety of the north met the lyrical, artistic traditions of the south. It was the land of the troubadours, poets who sang of chivalry and a radical new idea called courtly love. And in 1137, at about 15 years old, Eleanor inherited all of it. Her father, the Duke, died suddenly, and with no surviving sons, Eleanor became the Duchess of Aquitaine. Overnight, she was the most powerful and eligible heiress in Europe. In an age where a woman's value was tied to the land she brought to a marriage, Eleanor was the ultimate prize. She wasn't just a bride-to-be. She was a ruler, educated, fluent in Latin, and raised in a court that celebrated art and intellect. By law, her guardian was the King of France, Louis VI. He knew that whoever married Eleanor would control Aquitaine, and he couldn't let that prize fall into the hands of a rival. So, he did what any smart monarch would do. He claimed her for his own son. In July 1137, Eleanor married the heir to the French throne, also named Louis. Just weeks later, the old king died. Her new husband was now King Louis VII, and at 15, Eleanor was the Queen of France. The two couldn't have been more different. Eleanor was a product of the lively, cultured South. Louis was a quiet, deeply religious man, honestly more suited for a monastery than a throne. The Paris court was grim and rigid, a world away from the poetic energy of her home. Eleanor was assertive and used to having a say in politics, but Louis's court expected a queen to be quiet, decorative, and obedient. Eleanor wasn't interested in being a simple consort. She was the Duchess of Aquitaine, and she acted like it, holding real influence and taking an active role in governing. She brought life to the drab Parisian court, filling it with the poets and artists she loved. But her southern worldliness and political mind clashed with the conservative court. The whispers started almost immediately. Chroniclers, often on her husband's payroll, painted her as willful and headstrong, a woman who didn't know her place. The early tension in their marriage was manageable, but one single event would shatter it for good: the Second Crusade. In 1144, the Crusader state of Edessa fell, sending a shockwave through the Christian world. The Pope called for a new crusade, and King Louis VII, full of religious passion, eagerly answered the call. As he prepared his armies, Eleanor made a revolutionary decision. She was going too, and she wasn't just tagging along. Eleanor took the cross as the feudal ruler of her own lands, declaring her intent to lead her vassals from Aquitaine on this holy war. This was completely unprecedented. While other noble women had gone on crusade, none had done it with such a clear claim to their own authority. The journey east was a nightmare. While crossing a mountain range in modern-day Turkey, the part of the army commanded by one of Eleanor's vassals from Aquitaine moved too far ahead. This left the rest of the army, including King Louis, totally exposed. The Seljuk Turks attacked, and the French forces were decimated. Louis himself barely escaped. The blame immediately fell on Eleanor and her vassals, whose supposed lack of discipline was seen as the cause. The relationship between Eleanor and Louis, already weak, was now poisoned by failure and blame. The final breaking point came in Antioch. The city's ruler was Eleanor's dashing uncle, Raymond. He and Eleanor were close, sharing a language and culture. They spent hours talking strategy, and both agreed that the Crusaders should attack the key city of Aleppo. Louis refused. His only goal was to get to Jerusalem. The argument was public and humiliating for the king. Eleanor, fed up with her husband's rigid strategy, openly sided with her uncle. The situation exploded into scandal. Rumors, probably baseless but fueled by the drama, flew that Eleanor's relationship with her uncle was incestuous. Furious, Louis had Eleanor arrested and forcibly removed her from Antioch. The crusade ended in a humiliating failure. The royal couple returned to France in 1149, barely speaking. The marriage was dead. After 15 years and 2 daughters, Eleanor had failed to produce a male heir, a critical failure for a medieval queen. In March 1152, a council of bishops granted an annulment. The official reason was that they were too closely related, but everyone knew the truth. Louis got to keep their 2 daughters. But Eleanor, in a stunning move, got her lands back. She was once again the independent and incredibly wealthy Duchess of Aquitaine. At 30 years old, Eleanor left the French court. She was now a target for any ambitious lord who might kidnap her to gain her lands. But Eleanor wasn't anyone's pawn. She already had a plan, and it involved a man who was everything her ex-husband was not: young, ruthless, and ambitious. A man who happened to be King Louis's greatest rival, Henry, Duke of Normandy. It took just 8 weeks. 8 weeks after her first marriage was dissolved, Eleanor made her next, and most consequential, move. On May 18, 1152, she married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy. The marriage sent shockwaves across Europe. It wasn't just fast, it was a political earthquake that redrew the map. Henry was 11 years younger than Eleanor, a man with ferocious energy, a brilliant mind, and a famously bad temper. By marrying him, Eleanor didn't just get a protector, she created an empire. Her vast duchy of Aquitaine merged with Henry's lands in Normandy and Anjou, creating a territory that stretched from Scotland's border down to Spain. This new Angevin empire dwarfed the lands of her ex-husband, King Louis. He'd hoped to absorb Aquitaine, but now he faced a rival kingdom on his doorstep that was far more powerful than his own. 2 years later, in 1154, their power grew again. The King of England died, and Henry had the strongest claim to the throne. He and Eleanor sailed to England and were crowned at Westminster Abbey. For the second time, Eleanor was a queen. The first years of their reign were a partnership. They were a true power couple. While Henry was constantly on the move, enforcing his rule, Eleanor played an active role in government. She wasn't just a queen consort. She was a co-ruler, issuing orders and managing justice in her beloved Aquitaine. And she gave Henry what Louis never got: sons. Lots of them. Over 13 years, she had 8 children, including 5 sons: Henry, Richard, Geoffrey, and John, securing the dynasty. Their court was the most cultured in Europe. While Henry focused on law, Eleanor became a great patron of the arts, bringing the poetry and ideals of courtly love from her southern home. The English court became a hub of art and literature, a key part of the 12th century Renaissance. But a clash was inevitable between a woman as ambitious as Eleanor and a man as controlling as Henry. Their relationship, which started as a passionate alliance, began to fracture. Henry was a known womanizer, and his long, very public affair with a woman named Rosamund Clifford was a deep humiliation for the queen. Worse than the personal betrayal was the political struggle. As their sons got older, Henry made it clear that while he would give them titles, he would not give them any real power. He was obsessed with control and refused to share it with anyone, including his wife and his children. Feeling sidelined, Eleanor moved back to her home city of Poitiers in Aquitaine around 1168 and set up her own separate court. This court became the stuff of legend. It was here that the famous courts of love were said to have flourished, a glittering center of culture. But it was also a political power base, separate from Henry's control. Here, she raised her favorite son, Richard, grooming him to be the next ruler of Aquitaine. The family tensions finally exploded in 1173 in the Great Revolt. It was a stunning family fallout. The oldest son, Henry the young king, frustrated by his lack of power, rose in rebellion against his father. He He was quickly joined by his brothers, Richard and Geoffrey. And who was fanning the flames behind them? Their mother, Queen Eleanor. She was alienated from her husband and furious about his infidelities and his iron grip on power. She believed her sons deserved to rule. So, she did the unthinkable. She threw her support and the military might of Aquitaine behind a rebellion to overthrow her own husband. The revolt shook the Angevin Empire to its core. For over a year, Henry fought a war against his own wife and children. But Henry was a brilliant military commander. One by one, he crushed the rebellions and defeated his sons. Eleanor, seeing the cause was lost, tried to flee. Dressed as a man, she was captured. Her rebellion had failed. Henry had won. He forgave his sons. After all, they were his heirs. But he would show no mercy to his wife. For her ultimate act of defiance, Eleanor of Aquitaine would pay the price. Henry had her shipped to England, not as a queen, but as a prisoner. She would spend the next 16 years locked away. For 16 years, Eleanor of Aquitaine simply vanished. She was a political prisoner, moved between castles in England, stripped of all power. For a woman who had commanded courts and shaped kingdoms, this confinement must have been torture. Yet, even in captivity, she endured. The world outside her prison walls kept turning. Her sons remained a constant headache for Henry II. Henry the young king died during another rebellion. Her son Geoffrey died, too. The bitter fights between the remaining sons, Richard and John, and their father defined the last years of Henry's reign. Then, in 1189, everything changed. King Henry II died, defeated in a final war against his own son Richard. One of the very first acts of the new king, Richard I of England, was to order his mother's release. Eleanor emerged from her long imprisonment not as a broken woman, but as a political powerhouse ready to reclaim her life. She was nearly 70, an ancient age for the 12th century, yet her most powerful years were just beginning. Her son, Richard the Lionheart, was a great warrior but had little interest in the day-to-day business of ruling England. He was focused on launching the Third Crusade. He entrusted the kingdom to the one person he knew could hold it together, his mother. Acting as regent in England, Eleanor was brilliant. She traveled the country securing loyalty to Richard, putting down rebellions, and managing the entire kingdom. Her authority was absolute. When Richard was captured and held for an enormous ransom on his way home from the Crusade, it was Eleanor who took charge. She tirelessly raised the money, an astronomical sum, and then, in the dead of winter, personally traveled to Germany to bring her son home. All the while, she had to fight off the plots of her youngest son, John, who was trying to steal the throne. Eleanor outmaneuvered him at every turn. Her work wasn't done. In 1199, her beloved Richard died. The throne passed to her youngest son, John. Eleanor, now in her late 70s, stepped in again to secure the family inheritance for John. She became his most trusted advisor. In one last, incredible display of stamina, at nearly 80 years old, she journeyed across the Pyrenees into Spain. Her mission was to choose one of her granddaughters, Blanche of Castile, to marry the heir to the French throne, hoping the alliance would finally bring peace. Finally, Eleanor retired to the Abbey of Fontevraud, a place she had long supported. She died there in 1204, at the incredible age of 82. She was buried next to her complicated husband, Henry II, and her favorite son, Richard the Lionheart. Her tomb shows her not in prayer, but lying with an open book in her hands, a perfect symbol of her lifelong passion for learning and culture. So what is the legacy of this queen who defied two kings? It's immense. Politically, the empire she helped build set the stage for centuries of rivalry between England and France. Through her children, she became the grandmother of Europe, with her blood in nearly every royal house on the continent. Culturally, her impact was just as deep. Her patronage of poets and the culture of her courts were key to spreading the ideals of chivalry and courtly love, an influence that still echoes today. But maybe her greatest legacy is as a symbol of female power. In an age that tried to keep women in their place, Eleanor refused to be contained. She was a ruler in her own right, a duchess who influenced armies, a diplomat, and a regent who governed an empire. She challenged the authority of her husbands, defied the expectations of her time, and wielded power with an intelligence few could match. Her life was a masterclass in ambition, betrayal, and survival, proving that a queen could be more powerful than any king. Eleanor of Aquitaine's life was a whirlwind. But what do you think was her most defiant act? Divorcing the King of France, joining a crusade, or backing a rebellion against her own husband? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look into the life of one of history's most powerful women, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. You can also support the channel through the links in the description for some of the best books on Eleanor's incredible life. From the sunny fields of Aquitaine to a cold English prison, Eleanor's life was a lesson in power and survival. She outlived her rivals, outmaneuvered her enemies, and outlasted the rules that tried to cage her. She was a queen of two kingdoms, the mother of kings, and the architect of a cultural revolution. Her story is a powerful reminder that history isn't just made by men in armor, but by brilliant, defiant women who refuse to be forgotten. She wasn't just a character in the story of the 12th century. In many ways, she wrote it.